Hello everyone. Just having a moment to set up the show. And I can see some people already getting into the chat. That's great. Excellent. And I will have another question for you in a moment. Okay, so I can see most people here so far are in year 12. That's great. Excellent. Okay, we are just setting up the PowerPoint. Bear with a couple of technical moments here. Okay, great, we're ready to roll. Okay, so let's get started. So welcome everyone to the beginning of my EdSpace Summer School for Key Stage 5, and I can see that most people here are in year 12, which is great. That means I'll be able to talk you through the transition between year 11 English and year 12 and year 13 and what that looks like, because you may have a lot of preconceptions going in. You may know nothing about A-level English other than that you are really excited to study it. So we will get into it. My name's Eleanor. I am going to be the teacher for Key Stage 5, my EdSpace for English for this year, for this summer school, and then hopefully if you like this course, you will be able to follow along with the main course as well, where we will cover the most common A-level texts and really dig into that A-level analysis and high-level discourse that is that difference between A-level and GCSE. So, a little about me. I'm a teacher at my EdSpace. I went to the University of Pennsylvania and did a year abroad at Oxford, doing English and Spanish, and was educated in America as well as in England, so that's a little bit about my background as well. All that to say is I have been teaching A-level for quite a long time now, so if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat. We will be covering quite a lot today, but any other questions you're always welcome to ask as well. So you've already asked this first question in the chat. In the second question, could you please pop just into the chat itself the differences you think between GCSE and A-level English exist? So take a minute to have a think. and we'll go over them. So if you have no idea, don't worry about it. We will go through a whole bunch of reasons why A-level and GCSE English are very different beasts. Take a moment, you should be able to pop straight into the chat. Okay, I'm seeing a little bit. Reckon it's harder. Yeah, absolutely. Well, harder is a tricky one, because if you like English and what English is about, it's really not. It's much more what English is. And if you like English a lot and you sort of felt that there was a bit of distance between the English that you loved and GCSE English, where you're memorizing quotations, you're drilling, you're sort of being given lines of argument, and seeing quite a lot of the rules of English, and particularly GCSE English, then this is very different. This is much more your engagement with English and an independent study of the subject that you hopefully love. Here are some A-level texts can have deeper analysis, and absolutely. These are a couple more as well. Deeper analysis, absolutely. So GCSE, your teacher's probably given you quite a lot of the information. They're telling you what the lines of argument are. They're telling you what the symbols are. There are kind of agreed ways of talking about a topic, particularly because so many of the GCSE topics are covered so much. So Macbeth, he is guilty, he is ambitious, he is destroyed at the end. These are not new ideas for someone in GCSE study of English, and you may have felt kind of frustrated with the fact that there are these kind of traditional lines of argument if you want to argue something different and interesting and independent of that. Same with the analysis at GCSE. It's often single word, single line analysis. You know, unsex me here, full of scorpions is my mind for Macbeth. You spend quite a lot of time on those quotations, and you're focused on specific extracts. Yes, you use that for analysis of the full text, or you track Macbeth, for example, Inspector Ghoul's trajectory across the text, but you are sort of using one quotation to link all of it. So yes, LP, wanting to analyse the porter in Macbeth, that would be something that you could absolutely do in A-level much more, so you have the freedom to look at the A-level content much more. And then occasional engagement with critical theory or literary criticism. So your teacher might have given you, or you might have found like a line that you memorised that has a critical thought in it, about Macbeth, about an Inspector Ghoul, or you might have gone back to the author's own writing. So for example, J.B. Priestley writes a lot about socialism and his opinions about socialism. You may have included a line about that in your GCSE, but you're not really reading whole books about the book that you're studying. At A-level, much deeper, as Ananya said, much broader analysis. You have much more agency, much more freedom. So LP, if you want to analyse that porter and bring them in, that is your choice, as long as you can argue that it makes sense and build it into the analysis in a productive way. There are way fewer right answers as well. So your teacher may have told you, the porter in Macbeth, don't worry about him, he doesn't matter. You now have the agency to make that decision and to choose what to focus on. Is Macbeth on the A-level? It is not, but I'm speaking about the kind of the approach with something that ULP might have studied at GCSE. As well, there's much more thematic and character-led argument. So you're focusing on a character across a play, a theme across a play, with specific lines of argument. So you're interpreting this character's motivation, this character's presentation, this character's characterization. You're looking at the patterns across the text and taking a wider view. So you're not pretending that you are only at one part of the text, but rather your reader is expecting that you've read the entire text before you're writing this essay, and you're acting and analysing as if you have. You're not spoiling the ending for anyone by writing about it in conjunction with the beginning. Same with much more engagement around sec texts. Because of the amount of time that an A-level course generally has, you are expected for the most part, to be reading the text on your own time. That's one of the blessings of A-level, is you have that time to engage. That's one of the reasons you have free periods for A-level quite frequently, is to do that work, and also to read around the subject. So not just reading Othello, not just reading A Streetcar Named Desire and being done, but reading what other people think about this and generating not just your own personal opinion, but your own ideas about the conversation around these texts. And with that and your own understanding of those conversations, then formulating your argument, using literary criticism, you're expected to engage with that continuously across essays, and you will be seeing a lot more of it. Your teachers may be giving you articles to read, or you may be charged with going to look them up, or excited to go and look them up and find out about alternative interpretations. If you're interested in things like critical race theory, in queer theory, in post-colonial lenses or feminist lenses, then this is the idea that you'll be able to bring in. Unfortunately, on the A-level specification, there are a lot of texts that can do and hold up and be robust with that content. Just taking a look at two of the exam boards for A-level, the assessment objectives you'll see are extremely similar in that the wording even for a lot of this is the same. This is because you are expected to do certain things at A-level with your analysis. So with assessment objective 1, this is your argument. You're developing an argument. You're being assessed on how well you know the text and prove that through your writing, how well you're crafting arguments, how well you're embedding quotations and ideas from the text into your argument and grounding it in your argument. The second, how meaning is shaped in literary text. So you're doing that standard analysis, your language analysis, your structural analysis sometimes as well of the text, not just looking at this one time that there is a metaphor in a text or in an extract, but rather using that to talk about the pattern across the play or the novel or the text. AO3, you'll remember this from GCSE, is your contexts. And again, like everything in A-level, it's much more to it than just that Macbeth was written in the Jacobean era and King James had something to do with witches. This is much more thinking about the zeitgeist of the time, the culture of the time, and how these texts interact with the culture of the time. Are they a mouthpiece for the culture, or are they something resisting the dominant culture? AO4, rather than being as it is in GCSE, VSPAG is now connections across text. Now this isn't offered for or marked for every single question you have for A-level, because not all of them are comparison questions. But this part, AO4, is expecting you to craft an analysis of comparing and contrasting two texts, whether that's poems or prose texts, and building an argument that compares and contrasts them. So, for example, in A Thousand Splendid Suns and Tass the D'Urbervilles, looking at the presentation of marriage as oppressive to women. Or in two poems, looking at how conflict is presented as destructive, and showing how two different contexts, two different authors, two different texts contain the same idea but portray it very differently, and thus generate even more interesting and different meanings. And then AO5 is exploring literary texts informed by different interpretations, which means criticism. So this is a slightly smaller section of the percentage of what you're being marked in, but it is an expectation that you prove your knowledge of the big ideas in criticism. So, for example, for Othello, you're aware of what Coleridge says about Othello, and you're embedding that into your argument. So rather than just sort of mentioning it at the end of a paragraph, you're actually using it to advance your argument and saying, well, Coleridge says this about Macbeth, but other ideas disagree. And hello, we've got some more joiners. And yes, Coleridge, the same one who wrote Rime of the Ancient Mariner. When he wasn't doing that, he was also commenting and writing quite a lot about Othello and Shakespeare. So one to look out for when probably most of you study Othello going forward. So Edexcel and AQA here you can see are very similar. He was indeed, and hi Young Ski, welcome. So this is one of the texts you may study at A level. With this summer school course, we will be looking at quite a few different texts, poetry, prose, and drama. And though these may not be the actual texts you're studying, we're going to use them as a springboard so that you start to become aware of and see what A-level English study for literature looks like. So if you'll bear with, I will just read this out to you, this brief little summary of the beginning of A Thousand Splendid Suns. If anyone has read this book before or recognized this author, hit the chat because I want to see what people in the class know so far. So, Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. Mariam has lived her whole life on the outskirts, living with her mother, Nana, who appears to resent her presence. Her only joy is when her father, Jalil, visits her from nearby Herat, bringing presents, comfort, and encouragement to Mariam. Mariam longs to live with Jalil and her other half-siblings, but Nana insists she belongs only here with her because as a harami, or illegitimate child, she is an outcast. On her 15th birthday, Mariam makes a decision that ends up shaping her destiny. So, quite a suspenseful introduction to the text here. Kite Runner writer, absolutely. This Khaled Hosseini's first novel was Kite Runner, and the second was A Thousand Splendid Suns, which we will see he had a slightly different lens into his contemporary Afghan society. Some themes that we'll see in A Thousand Splendid Suns are very common across A level. You might have argued these themes in GCSE, but they're much more broad scope when we're talking about them at A level. So, beauty, colonization, punishment, injustice, blame, culture, death, hope, violence, greed, society, parenthood, revenge, social inequality, femininity, masculinity, education, longing, life are all ideas that appear in this text. A little bit about the author, Khaled Hosseini, still alive and writing. He has, in the last few years, published a third text, kind of a third to these first two. For LP who knows, Kite Runner was his bombastic first novel. He was born in Kabul to Afghan parents. His father was a diplomat, his mother was a Farsi teacher. They lived in Afghanistan, in Kabul, and then later in Iran and France before the 1978 revolution in Afghanistan, after which his family applied for political asylum in the US and they relocated to California, where his parents set up a restaurant. Hosseini went to high school in America and writes quite a lot about the culture shock he experienced moving from the Middle East and then Europe to the US. He went to medical school in California and worked as a doctor for 10 years, wrote his first novel, A Kite Runner, in the early mornings while still working as a doctor. So a testament to how much can be achieved when you wake up early and are really motivated to start your day well. A Thousand Splendid Suns came relatively shortly after that as a very highly anticipated second novel. More than 40 million copies sold so far of his three novels, and his third novel, And the Mountains Echoed, was published in 2013, so a little bit of time has passed. He now serves as a Goodwill Ambassador and High Commissioner for Refugees, and has set up the Khaled Hosseini Foundation for Humanitarian Aid, and has been an outspoken advocate for aid to Afghanistan since especially since the return of the Taliban in 2021. So this is the beginning of the text. We are going to read it together, and you've got this in your workbook as well, so ideally you have that either printed out or up on the screen as well, so that you can be engaging with the text rather than just sitting and listening to the melodious sounds of my voice. And what I want you to do as we read is just highlight, underline, make a note of anything that stands out to you. And then after we read this extract, I'm going to ask for your reactions. So 2 things. First of which, reading along and just highlighting as we read anything that stands out to you as interesting, and not necessarily personally interesting, but also sort of critically interesting. Remember, you're thinking now as a critic, and you're thinking now as an A-level student. So what stands out to you? This is going to be something your teachers ask you a lot. After which you'll post in the chat, okay? So, Mariam was 5 years old the first time she heard the word harami. At the time, Mariam did not understand. She did not know what the word harami, bastard, meant. Nor was she old enough to appreciate the injustice, to see that it is the creators of the harami who are culpable, not the harami, whose only sin is being born. Mariam did surmise, by the way Nana said the word, that it was an ugly, loathsome thing to be a harami, like an insect, like the scurrying cockroaches Nana was always cursing and sweeping out of the kulba. Later, when she was older, Mariam did understand. It was the way Nana uttered the word, not so much saying it as spitting it at her, that made Mariam feel the full sting of it. She understood then what Nana meant, that a harami was an unwanted thing, that she, Mariam, was an illegitimate person who would never have legitimate claim to the things other people had, things such as love, family, home, acceptance. Jalil never called Mariam this name. Jalil said she was his little flower. So I can see LP has already put in the similes, absolutely. Such rich description, just starting off and immediately pulling us into the story here. So now that we've read, take a moment just to pop into the chat what else you notice about the text so far. Anything that stands out to you, anything surprising. It's quite an intense start off of a novel, I will say that, for sure. Juxtaposition of the little flower and the scurrying cockroaches, absolutely. Yes. Such visual imagery, as well as such a clear idea of the different relationships that Mariam has with her parents, Nana and Jalil. Okay, so if anyone would like to enter into the chat, you're welcome to keep doing that as we go, but I'm going to sort of narrate what I would be thinking as an A-level student and an A-level teacher going into this extract. I can see some more people popping into the chat, so let's look at that first. So what does the word kolba mean? Kolba is a Farsi word for a shack. So Nana and Mariam live in a shack in the countryside outside of Herat, which is, we will see why in the next extract. And Iris, the contrast of love, family, home and acceptance to feeling unwanted. Yes, and we can see how much Mariam feels unwanted in words like, for example, harami. And if we see the grounding immediately in Mariam's age, the first time she heard this word, she was 5 years old. So her mother called her a bastard, with all of the vitriol and with all of the energy and heat behind that word when she was 5 years old for the first time. So young that she did not understand what that meant. But notice, at the time. So we have some indicators here that she has since learnt what that means, that she has since been forced to reckon with this perception of herself. Calling mum and dad by first names, creating distance in the relationship. LP, absolutely. We're noticing that Mariam feels such distance, even from Jalil, who said she was his little flower, and obviously from Nana, who describes her as a harami. Look how many times harami is peppered across the text. It's that use of repetition that really seems to echo in our ears, and its gravity is made so much more potent by the fact that it literally seems to echo, so we get the sense that it is being repeated across Mariam's childhood. And that, coupled with the word illegitimate here and bastard here, really does show that this word is peppered through the text here, and peppered through Mariam's self-perception and the presentation she has. Whoops, sorry about that. Notice as well, and I'll do this in a different colour so we can see slightly differently. So we've got this idea of harami being poured across this text, peppered through it, and the vitriol that would be sending through. Yes, we've got Nana and Jalil being distance in terms of the referential strategies used for them, that Mariam feels herself separate, not only from legitimate people who have things like love, family, and acceptance, and really names that aren't epithets being thrown at them, but Mariam is associating any of these positive things with legitimacy, and she does not feel that she has claim to any of them. So perhaps in that distance and referential strategies with Nana and Jalil, we can see that Mariam doesn't feel she has a family, doesn't feel she can make a claim for a family because she is not legitimate herself. Really expected to know these Farsi words. Interesting question, LP, that would we be expected to know these Farsi words? So quite often for the words, as you can see here in the beginning, the word harami and the em dashes, bastard, a lot of the words are defined like that, kind of within the line itself. For others of them, they aren't defined across the text. And in some versions of the novel, there is a glossary at the end of Farsi and Pashto words used in the text. But in other versions, there aren't. And Hosseini has spoken about this and the fact that he really wants to locate his text within a certain culture, and particularly given the discourses about outsiders and insiders within the discourses of immigration, as well as Mariam herself, it appears that he wants to almost create a little bit of distance from the Western audience, right? To make us as majority English readers and speakers to feel that slight distance that Mariam feels from society, perhaps, or to feel that our acceptance of English as a language of power is just slightly destabilized here because we're put on the back foot. We're encountering words we don't understand, which is often the onus of people whose language is first not English. With glossing, absolutely, yes. Now, let's look here at some of the words associated with blame. LP, not necessarily the main audience were Brits, but was certainly a Western audience, so English people, Americans as well. This novel was published first in America, as was The Kite Runner, and we know Hosseini came from a partially American context as well. But remember, this was published in the early 2000s during the wars after 9/11, which for America in particular was kind of culture defining. English speakers, yes, absolutely, it was first published in English and was only later translated into Farsi and Pashto. So clearly it's for people who speak English first. Now, let's look at some language about blame here. Shall we notice this idea of injustice? She wasn't old enough to appreciate the injustice. This idea of culpability, this idea of sin, and the sin only of being born. So her existence then is given to us as a sin. The idea of cockroaches, these scurrying cockroaches that Nana curses and sweeps away. This idea of a pestilence, appears here, as well as this idea of unwantedness, of, we can see here again, illegitimacy and legitimacy here. Notice how much blame is being put on Mariam for her own existence, but notice the authorial voice as well. She was not old enough to appreciate the injustice of it, to see it's the creators of the Harami who are culpable, not the Harami. So immediately, in the first few lines, Hosseini is positioning us to sympathise with Mariam rather than to sympathise with the traditional societal view of the time, the conventional view at the time, which was that an illegitimate child is inherently sinful. And I'm so glad that someone, and quite a few people actually, have pulled out this juxtaposition between the little flower and the scurrying cockroaches. What a strong piece of visual imagery to include in this text. And notice it juxtaposes Nana's, and apologies for with Jalil's portrayal and view of Nana and treatment of Nana. This is going to be a crucial continued juxtaposition across as these two characters are positioned in conflict. So let's take a look now at another piece, now that we have some of these ideas. Yes, Yangsky, so they view her as a pest in the home, absolutely. And even the unwanted person, Nana, who lives as an outcast on society, is trying to sweep Mariam away. Imagine what having an illegitimate child would do for a woman in a very traditional society. It would be kind of an ever-present, ever-growing, ever-remaining visualization and embodiment of shame. We can see that these two characters, Mariam, over Mariam, so Nana and Jalil, are fighting and very contentious in this beginning few chapters. Mariam, we can see, and I imagine we would assume, feels closer to her father, who calls him her little flower, his little flower, and never calls her a Harami, but comes to visit her and gives her presents and makes her feel something other than this illegitimate, unwanted piece of trash, or pest, as Yangsky absolutely put it. So Nana is very anti-Jalil, but due to the power dynamic between them, upper class and working class, servant class, and man and woman, and legitimate and powerful and illegitimate, and an outcast, Nana's unable to say this to Jalil or to be able to argue with him on an even keel. So instead, she warns Mariam about this when particularly Mariam decides to advocate for Jalil, says that she loves him, says she wants to see him more, says she wants to go to school, to be more like his other daughters who live in Herat, in his home. She says, this is Nana speaking, "Learn this now and learn it well, my daughter. Like a compass needle that points north, a man's accusing finger always finds a woman. Always." I'm going to read this quotation again, and as I do, I want you to just pop into the chat what stands out to you about this quotation. That can be something literary, that can be something reactive of yours, that can be something that you think this might be foreshadowing about the dynamics between these. "Learn this now and learn it well, my daughter. Like a compass needle that points north, a man's accusing finger always finds a woman. Always." What do we notice here? I can see some people typing. Oops. So feel free to pop into the chat. Imperativos, yes, absolutely. We've got some commands in here. Why the commands? Why do we think that there would be commands here? Opinion statement of a man's accusing finger is presented as fact by the simile before it. Indeed, yes, we've got the simile indicated by the like here, like a compass needle that points north. That men always accuse the women when in trouble. Indeed, yes. Love the chat here so far. Keep putting them in here. Notice here. So feel free to put them in. I'm just going to talk through some of the ideas as well, and we'll bring your ideas into it as we go. So I'm thinking as an A-level student here, what do I notice here? Learn this now and learn it well. Immediately we have insistence, we have urgency here, created through the imperatives. We have the parallel phrases here, learn it now and learn it well. So we also have repetition, we're hearing that learning. I'm wondering now, why does Mariam have to learn this lesson, and what has made Nana learn this lesson? What has made her think that this is an important lesson for Mariam to learn? It almost seems like a warning, right? You have to learn this now. This is what people say to you, right? Learn this lesson now, learn it well, so that something doesn't happen in the future. So again, there's a little bit of foreshadowing here as well. It seems like, as Youngsky says, men always accuse the women when in trouble. Yes, will this then happen to Mariam in her life? Will this happen in future? The emotional dependence, I'm seeing Ananya saying, fact that her needle as a person shows her reliance on them for stability. Yes, the symbol of guidance and certainty. Exactly. So moving into this, and we're going to skip my daughter for now, I'll come back to it. Leaning into this simile of like a compass needle that points north. So as some people have suggested in the chat so far, yes, a compass needle, if you've played with a compass before or done Duke of Edinburgh or something, is magnetic. So it, due to the magnets, immediately moves on its own without any seemingly external pressure, moves towards north wherever it's facing. So that suggests that the compass needle, the man's accusing finger, and that blame of a pointed finger pointing straight at you is automatic. It's even subconscious. No matter what happens, that compass needle is going to move north, and no matter what happens, a man's accusing finger is going to point towards a woman. So that this is then suggesting that this is a systemic issue. This isn't just about Nana and her life or possibly her prejudices. This is about society, right? A society that automatically blames women for the actions or inactions or misdeeds of women. Very good. I'm seeing in the chat. Yes, it's presented as fact. It's always being accused. Notice we have that word twice, always and always. That repetition seems really ominous here, right? Because we can hear it echoing in the fact that this phrase and this idea of blame is going to come back, even in that repetition itself. And the fact that Hosseini takes that time and space to interrupt long flowing sentences with that always one word sentence really does make this word ring with us as something that is a non-negotiable, that is fact, as I think Iris it was who said as well. And yes, if Nana is saying this and our only male character currently is Jalil, we can see that perhaps this is something to do with Jalil, and this may turn around on Mariam whenever that there is a blame, and the blame is going to fall either on Jalil or Mariam. It's going to fall on Mariam. Let's take a look as well as that my daughter, the referential strategy there. Notice Nana's not calling her Harami now. This is a moment of quite tenderness, it seems like, despite the urgency and despite quite the harsh message, as indeed Youngsky says, already been through it, so want to learn it so she can avoid a similar situation. Perhaps, yes, that phrase, my daughter, really does stand out because daughter suggests an intergenerational passing on, not only of this message, but also of the society in which this automatic blame occurs. So it seems like Nana feels a responsibility to pass this on to the next generation, to pass this warning on to the next generation before it can be affected as much as Nana can do. So this is suggesting that there is a patriarchal society at play here, and that there is blame inherent in this patriarchal society that intergenerationally affects women, and thus different generations of women not only hand down blame, but also hand down warning. Okay? Very nice analysis so far, everyone. Let's take a look at why, perhaps, this warning is needed, or perhaps why Nana has learnt this warning so severely and is so insistent on passing it on. LP says, feel kind of helpless though. No coping strategies. Indeed, it is very much, and we'll see slightly later. Nana says, the only thing a woman or a girl like you, and notice that, again, that description there, a girl like you is meant to do is to endure. So there are no coping strategies here. That's intentional. Women are not expected to cope. They're expected to absorb and take until their own destruction. So let's carry on reading. And again, just pull out what stands out to you in the text. Here's a slightly longer extract. So you may need to sort of listen and read, and then I'll give you a minute or two to go back and put something in the chat that stands out to you. So, in addition to the cinema, Jalil owned land in Karok, land in Farah, 3 carpet stores, a clothing shop, and a black 1956 Buick Roadmaster. He was one of Herat's best connected men, friend of the mayor and the provincial governor. He had a cook, a driver, and 3 housekeepers. Nana had been one of those housekeepers, until her belly began to swell. When that happened, Nana said, the collective gasp of Jalil's family sucked the air out of Herat. His in-laws swore blood would flow. The wives demanded that he throw her out. Nana's own father, who was a lowly stone carver in the nearby village of Guldaman, disowned her. Disgraced, he packed his things and boarded a bus to Bran, never to be seen or heard from again. Sometimes, Nana said early one morning, as she was feeding the chickens outside the kulba, I wish my father had had the stomach to sharpen one of his knives and do the honourable thing. It might have been better for me. Better for you, too, maybe. It would have spared you the grief of knowing that you are what you are. But he was a coward, my father. He didn't have the dill, the heart for it. Jalil didn't have the dill either, Nana said, to do the honourable thing. To stand up to his family, to his wives and in-laws, and accept responsibility for what he had done. Instead, behind closed doors, a face-saving deal had quickly been struck. The next day, he had made her gather her few things from the servants' quarters, where she'd been living, and sent her off. You know what he told his wives by way of defence? That I forced myself on him. That it was my fault. Didi, do you see? This is what it means to be a woman in this world. To Jalil and his wives, I was a poke root, a mugwort. You too. And you weren't even born yet. What's a mugwort? Mariam asked. A weed, Nana said. Something you rip out and toss aside. Learn this now and learn it well, my daughter. Like a compass needle that points north, a man's accusing finger always finds a woman. Always. Take a moment to pop into the chat, and I'm going to, as you do that, rather than reread, highlight some places I would like us to talk about. I can see some typing in the chat. Just pop in whatever you think. You guys have been doing some really interesting high-level analysis, but reactions are also okay. Pop straight into the chat. Anything that stands out to you. There's quite a lot going on here, isn't there, so far? Okay, so for now, let's get started, but feel free to pepper into the chat as we keep going. So, first thing that stands out to me here, and I'm going to do these in order of the extract just so as not to get you confused. Notice where we start with this. We start with Jalil. We start with a powerful man. Not only he has a cinema, which is a very modern technology for this time period. This is the 1970s. He also has land in 2 different areas, 3 carpet stores, a clothing shop, a fancy American car, and is got very high-powered friends. Cook, driver, 3 housekeepers. So he has an incredible amount of power, prestige, status. The fact that a syndeton is used here in terms of the different phrases being connected by commas highlights how much he has here. This is literally a maximalist approach. In contrast, Nana is one of the housekeepers out of 3 that Jalil has. And notice how the pregnancy is described. There's no romance in it as well at all. It's until her belly began to swell. Notice the passive voice there. This doesn't sound like anything to do with a whirlwind romance, no love here. It's very passive. As LP said, implied Nana's impregnation was consensual, ? It seems like possibly not, right? Because this is such passive language, it sounds like she had no agency over this, right? And perhaps Jalil, as such a powerful man who has so much status in society, feels that he can take and have non-consensual sex or rape, essentially, Nana, and impregnate her. Because it certainly seems like she wasn't pursuing him, both based on the phrasing of that passive language, as well as her status compared to his, right? Even if we're thinking about consent, the power dynamic here would make this a very tricky relationship to negotiate and suggest that Jalil could have used this power dynamic, the fact that he is so well connected and a man and her employer, that he did take advantage of his power and use it to sexually assault Nana or to force her to engage in sex with him. And notice the reaction as well. The gasp sucked the air out of Harat, so it's literally stifling the reaction. Yes, Jalil is hypocritical. He preaches love. He says, "You're my little flower," but look at that, at how he treats Nana and Mariam, the mother of his child. Euphemistic language about abortion and sexual assault because this is almost told through a child's eyes. Absolutely, right? This is the version that Mariam is told about her parents. So imagine as well, we're hearing cockroach, we're hearing harami, we're hearing bastard, we're hearing culpable, and then we're seeing how her conception began. Also, Jalil's cowardly, rather than confronting societal judgment, sends Mariam away. Exactly. And Ananya, I can see you know about Rashid. So yes, she is sent away, not just now, but later. And notice how this is phrased. Sucked the air out of Harat, his in-laws swore blood would flow. Whose blood? Jalil's? Certainly not. It's not even said explicitly, but implicitly we know that this is Nana's blood, right? That Nana is being blamed and Mariam, consequently, is being blamed for this scandal. And that Jalil has no blame and no part in it. And that blood would flow. What a violent image for a pregnant woman to confront, right? This is punishment. This is sacrificial. It could be either abortion or murder. And based on the fact that Mariam did survive, perhaps Nana chose to live with an unwanted and illegitimate child in order to avoid aborting the child that she has. Or yes, murder of them both is absolutely suggested here. And the fact that it's not really clear which shows how much this violence is willing to take out anything that goes against Jalil and his reputation, his family's reputation. Notice the wives as well demanded he throw her out. So there's so much violence and physical rejection here. Her own father boards a bus never to be seen again, disowns her. And Nana says the honourable thing for him to have done would be to sharpen one of his knives and kill her, and kill both her and Mariam, to forcibly abort the child she's carrying. Unclear. It seems like she would bear the brunt of this. But if we have this sharpened knife and blood flowing, we have this sacrificial image, right? Nana is being sacrificed physically, sexually, societally, for Jalil's reputation, and Mariam is as well. Nana says that Jalil didn't have the heart, the stomach, to do anything about the situation either. So we see he is a passive, cowardly, hypocritical character. Absolutely. And notice the juxtaposition here. We had initial juxtaposition between Nana and Jalil, and we felt a little bit on Jalil's side if we're being real with ourselves in that first presentation. But the second presentation here, we can see that our sympathies are changing. He sent her away to the Kulba, so sent her out of Herat. She can't live in Herat, disgracing them by her literal existence. She can live on the outskirts of society, actually on the outskirts of the town, on the outskirts of the city of Herat. And notice the juxtaposition here: to stand up to his family, his wives and in-laws, to accept responsibility. No, behind closed doors. So very much in contrast with the public shaming, rejection, violence of Nana. Closed doors, face-saving deal, quickly struck. Jalil is saved. This story comes out in which, as we can see, that compass needle of blame comes to Nana and said that she forced herself on him. Now, based on the power dynamic in that situation, we can say that is extremely unlikely, but we can see that it was cast as her fault, and that to them she was a poke root, a mugwort, as was Mariam. So they are metaphorically that symbol of them being weeds, paired with the cockroaches, this outcast, pest, unwanted thing, to literally be ripped out and tossed aside. And metaphorically, that is what happens to Mariam and to Nana as well, in being outcast to the outskirts of society. Adrienne Rich, a famous feminine critic, and I can see we're getting a little bit short on time, so I'm going to speed up, but feel free to throw into the chat as we keep going. Adrienne Rich says, the woman's body is the terrain on which the patriarchy is corrected. What does this mean? This means that in order for patriarchy to be built, women's bodies need to be the foundation. Now that can mean women's bodies as in control of their bodies. It can also mean their physical bodies are forced to be subjugated, sacrificed to the patriarchy in order for the patriarchy to continue. In other words, in order for patriarchy to be built up, there's something that has to be on the ground, right? In order for someone to be in power, someone has to be powerless. And someone to be employer, someone has to be employee. And those layers are important because patriarchy requires women to be subjugated, to be oppressed, to be on a lower level. So in order for that to happen, we're hearing that my daughter pinging back to us, right? Learn this now and learn it well. The fact that this is something that is intergenerational, and we will see, as Ananya said, late in her marriage to Rashid, this warning will echo through Mariam's experience and Hosseini's presentation of women, different women, as we keep going through the text. So what I want you to put in these last maybe 3 minutes of the chat, impressions of Nana, impressions of Jalil, and any predictions for what's going to happen in this novel so far. So if you know the text, then you're welcome to draw on that. I wouldn't throw the big spoilers in just for anyone who hasn't read it yet. But based on what we've seen so far, this could look very like something that your teacher asks you if you do this text or another text on one of your first lessons, is just to write a response based on the text that you've studied so far, knowing that you haven't read everything and knowing you only know a little bit, what we can see about these characters based on what we've seen. So for me, I would be thinking Nana is extremely harsh, but she's also realistic. She's someone who is a sacrifice and has been sacrificed for the preservation of male reputation. She is an extremely an untraditional mother figure, right? She's not loving, caring, etc. Not anything warm or fuzzy at all, but rather something very much harsher and almost brutal in her treatment of Mariam, but perhaps also, based on that second extract, justified, right? If she, in not wanting Mariam to go to school, in telling her she's a weed, she's a cockroach, she's a harami, maybe preparing her for what will absolutely be Mariam's reality if she is a harami woman in this world. Same with Jalil. We've hit some excellent descriptions of him so far in the chat. That he is hypocritical, that his euphemism is very transparent, that he's cowardly and forces her to live away from him and not take any of the blame for essentially ruining Mariam and Nana's lives by forcing Nana to have sex with him. And then any predictions? I saw a mention of Rashid, but what do we think Mariam's life is going to be like? What do we think her relationship with her parents is going to be like based on this initial presentation? Do we think she's ever going to see Jalil in a different light or Nana in a different light based on this very, very beginning of the text? In these last few moments as well, as you're potentially still typing, I will say that your homework is already posted. It's very brief, a couple of multiple choice questions and a couple of open-ended. From what I can see in the chat, you guys are well ready to engage with some of that content. And there are also video solutions posted where I talk a little bit more about A-level homework and expectations around that. And I explain all of the answers and also give you some model paragraphs and some guidance to show you what A-level looks like based just on those extracts. So unless there is anything else to appear in the chat, I think it's gone a little bit quiet in these last couple of moments, perhaps because people are getting ready for their next lesson or are already furiously writing away at their homework. Then I will leave it for another 30 seconds and then I will end the broadcast so that you can jump to your next lesson, jump straight into the homework, or jump on with your day. But thank you so much to everyone who contributed. It's been brilliant to hear your ideas. Thank you for being brave and putting them into the chat, even though this is, for many of you, your first time engaging with A-level. That's really exciting that you've chosen to do A-level, and I'm so looking forward to more ideas that we share together going forward. Actually, on Friday will be our next lesson. So for now, take care and see you on Friday. Bye.